Earlier, we talked about Wisconsin, where Republican lawmakers passed a bill to diminish the powers of incoming Democrats. It seems to be happening in Michigan as well. The Republican-controlled Michigan legislature voted to advance a bill that strips campaign finance oversight power from the incoming Democratic Secretary of State. The lame-duck Senate Election Committee approved a bill yesterday to shift financial oversight to a bipartisan committee. Republicans also plan to move forward with legislation that would empower lawmakers to intervene in any suit at any stage, a right that is already granted to the state's Attorney General. Joining us now is Colorado's current 5-term congressman representing the state's 2nd district and the newly elected governor of that state, Jared Polis, at first time on TV with us since he became governor. And I want to congratulate you, but also ask you about what is going on in Wisconsin and Michigan with this attempt to diminish the power of Democrats.
Well, you know, no one likes this sort of sour grapes bitterness. Frankly, it's going to, and already is, backfiring on the Republican Party. Voters, Republican, Democrat, Independent, they expect our elected officials to honor the results of the election rather than undermine those results. And I think that this really shows that in Michigan and Wisconsin, the Republicans are choosing to do what they can to undermine those results rather than honor the will of the voters.
Jackie.
Hey, Governor, or Governor-elect, congratulations on your victory. I'm wondering if you think that Democrats should be calling for a redo on this election in North Carolina.
With the North Carolina election, I think there's a criminal investigation. There's obviously legitimate issues that have been raised. I understand that there were ballots that were likely illegally harvested. I think it's one of the things that we need to take out of the realm of politics. It's really just a criminal question, what laws were violated, and if there were sufficient violations, then they should call for a new election rather than seat somebody who's forever tainted by charges of impropriety.
Hey, Governor-elect, it's Willie Geist. It's nice to meet you over television airwaves. Anyway, you are the new governor in a swing state, a national swing state. Hillary Clinton won by 5 points. So I'm interested in how you won your race. And I noted that you really put front and center climate change and renewable energy. Those used to be sort of non-starters in politics, that people didn't care. It was way down the list of people's priorities. But with the release of that climate change report a couple of days ago, and young people obviously making that more of a priority, do you believe that will be more of a core issue, not just for Democrats, but for the country?
Well, it's a core issue for the world, more than just our state, more than just the country. In Colorado alone, we have a climate-dependent economy, our great ski industry. I hope you all come to Vail and Aspen and Breckenridge. We have a strong agricultural industry as well. So, I mean, climate is not just something theoretical. It's bread and butter, kitchen table issues about jobs. So we're excited to have a bold goal of achieving 100% renewable energy by 2040. Our largest utility, Xcel, I just joined their CEO yesterday in announcing they're reducing carbon by 80% by 2030. So that's a strong start.
Okay, so Governor, let's pull the thread on that a little bit. Front page story in the New York Times, greenhouse gas emissions are up. We hear rhetorically, you know, about climate change. It'll soon be beachfront property in Scranton, Pennsylvania, things like that. But it somehow doesn't really grab people, especially the older that people get, that this is such a critical issue. How do you, as a candidate, translate the impact and the importance of paying attention to and doing something about climate change to the voters when you're out there trying to get elected? How do you do it?
So in our state, it's two things. One, again, it's climate-dependent jobs. It's putting food on the table for families. Two, it's a public safety issue. With longer, drier summers, we've had an increase in incidents of forest fires over the last decade. We need to do a better job on mitigation and prevention, but also address some of the underlying causes and have cleaner air. Finally, we address it as a health issue. You know what? Regardless of where the climate's going, having cleaner air and less pollution means lower asthma rates, lower cancer rates over time, lower health care costs, and longer, healthier lives. And Colorado prides ourselves on being a healthy state.
Jackie?
And I know you have a laundry list of things to do that Governor Hickenlooper has left you when you take office, but I can't resist but ask a 2020 question. Two of your colleagues have the opportunity to potentially put this issue of climate change, or as I've heard Senator Bennett refer to it as climate adaptation, onto the national stage. Would you have any advice for Hickenlooper and Senator Bennett in terms of their consideration of whether or not they should run for president in 2020?
Well, look, they're both good friends, and I think we have a lot to talk about in Colorado. We're really a forward-looking and innovative state, in many ways, an island of new ideas and stability and enlightenment in the country. We hope to take that to the next level with full-day kindergarten and moving forward on saving people money on health care. I think we have a lot of offers to offer, a lot of ideas to offer at the national stage, and whether that takes the form of the candidacy of our governor or our senator, we'll see. But they're both great people who have a lot of good ideas to offer.
Colorado Governor-elect Jared Polis, thank you so much. Great to have you on. And coming up.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.